Today, in Hancock, we're going to visit the Taunton Bay Education Center. This new center is located across from the Hancock Post Office on US Route 1 in a building called Tamarack Place. This map shows the very large watershed for the Taunton Bay area. So it extends well beyond just the tidal estuary to include streams and ponds in the surrounding area where the water runs off to feed Taunton Bay. As we know, Taunton Bay is a tidal water body, and that means that the tide flows in to the bay over tidal falls, and so the high tide is different in Sullivan, in Franklin, and in Hancock than it is at other points in the area, for example, in Bar Harbor. So it's useful to have a tide clock to know when the tide is coming in and which way the tide is running. To study the movement of the tide, Steve Perrin has used a drifter. It's just a bottle that's partially full of water with a flag on it that can float with the tide. And he has done a series of studies called drifter studies, measuring how far that bottle of water flows at 15-minute intervals as the tide comes in and as it goes out. So it's fascinating to see the flow of the tide, how long it takes, and where the main path of the tide is at high tide. The human history of Taunton Bay is also a very interesting focus of the Education Center. All three towns, Hancock, Sullivan, and Franklin, have historical societies and have contributed to the displays that are available for view here at the center. We also have some local postcards and greeting cards that are available for purchase. Moses Butler is regarded as the first settler on Taunton Bay in 1764. Butler Point is named after Moses Butler. Hancock and Franklin have been settled as shipping and boat building regions. The canal dug through Carrying Place by local citizens was in order to float logs from Taunton Bay to a sawmill on Pettingale Creek. Lincoln Wharf store used to stand on the shores of Taunton Bay. It was built around 1860 and provided food and supplies for the sailing trade that went in and out of Taunton Bay during the sailing days. An important part of the history of the bay was the granite mining in Franklin and Sullivan, and the ships that carried these stones used to provide paving and curbstone in major East Coast cities went in and out of Taunton Bay over tidal falls. Archaeological evidence has found the history of human activity in Taunton Bay area for at least the last 5,000 years. 20 Native American grave sites of the Red Paint peoples have been excavated in Hancock at the tidal falls. Many people remember the old Singing Bridge that was built when US Route 1 was put through Hancock to connect Hancock and Sullivan across the Taunton River. This bridge was originally a swinging bridge that opened up to allow the tall ships to pass through on their way to the east coast with the paving stones. The bridge has been replaced now with a modern span, but you can still see the Taunton Bay River flowing in and out as you cross over that bridge on your way to Sullivan. Now, why do they call it the Singing Bridge?
I think you used to listen to it, and, you know, because it's made out of steel, so there's a lot of sounds it made.
When you drive across it, right. We urge you to visit Taunton Bay Education Center to read about the Taunton Bay study, perhaps even to examine the final report of the study, to see relevant clippings about events related to Taunton Bay, or even to read the obituary of the late Howard Tomcat Gordon. You might also be interested in trying out some of the sea chips that are available, or in watching one of the videotapes of the recent lectures. If you've missed any copies of the Taunton Bay newsletter put out by the Friends of Taunton Bay, we have some extra copies that are available. And if you have souvenirs that you found along the bay, or historical objects that might be of interest to others, feel free to bring them in and donate them to the Taunton Bay Education Center. Taunton Bay Education Center. We are open on Wednesdays and Saturdays from 10 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon in July and August. Off US Route 1 at Tamarack Place, across from the US Post Office in Hancock. Look for the sign on US Route 1, across from the post office in the building called Tamarack Place. Open Wednesdays and Saturdays, 10 to 4.